thing I do want to touch on is this phrase they use, like a price set, or setting a certain price. And I'm a big believer in that nonsense taking place. I mean, they've propagated the narrative, the Great Reset, the Great Reset, the Great Reset. What happens when you reset a play PS5, for example? The thing turns off. You maybe we have some sort of pause in the financial system, in the banking system, bank holiday. They reboot all their tech in the background, and then things are repriced in terms of, or maybe some of these ISO tokens are repriced, even gold and silver. I think those could be repriced as well, because what have all these central banks been accumulating? Precious metals, and well, specifically partnering with XRP or Ripple as well. So it's like these are things that I think could happen as well, because they can just BS the price to whatever they kind of wanted to at this point.
Yeah. This is so a lot of people, it's funny too, because people go, oh, I don't know about that, whatever. This actually like isn't a new thing. This actually happened in Venezuela like twice in the past 10 years, where they reset their currency, they reset their stock market, they reset basically their whole economy. They reset it twice and they crashed it twice. But this isn't like a new thing. Like this happens all over the world to a certain degree. The difference with us is we're the world's reserve currency and we're the big bad economy that's supposed to be so great. But the big thing is it's not that we're immune to it. And that's the thing. If we do ever reset, odds are, and this happens with every reset, you'll have a melt up. And the melt up isn't really a melt up. It's a collapse in the local currency. But what happens is the value of everything goes up because the currency becomes worth less and less and less and less. You see what I mean? And then you go into it's not hyperinflation, but it's hyperinflation on paper, because in everyone's day to day, everything will seem fine. But the stock market, crypto, all these assets, property values will look ridiculous. You see what I mean? And you'll get inflation in your everyday life, but you'll see all the financial instruments tweak out. You see what I mean? To an outrageous degree, typically causing but that's the thing. You're already seeing this with the dollar. If you see the M1 money supply, it literally goes like this. The instruments are already starting to tweak out for a reset to come. So the idea of there being a reset isn't that weird, especially when you start looking at a lot of these instruments that are already, like if you look at the GameStop situation, that itself is a perfect example of a financial instrument that is just being, it's like there's no reason for it. It's entirely being not really manipulated, but it's being contorted. You see what I mean? It's being stretched in a manner that it's not supposed to. And people go, all sorts of things happen and stuff, but not like to this degree. And you're seeing this all over the place. So right. I think you'll see more and more of this, where you see a lot of these weird, and I think this goes both ways, whether it's like, assets just spiking to the moon all of a sudden, or things just crashing to zero out of nowhere. And actually, it's funny too. You actually see more of this in the commodities markets than you do in anywhere else, but nobody talks about them because it's not as like sexy as the stock market. You could see soy like crash 12%, and it would have giant, agricultural ramifications for it, but nobody would really care about it. And it's the exact same thing. It's like things are being contorted and being distorted in such a weird way, especially with leverage and especially with the money printing and the amount of money going into the economy. And it's at some point, the financial instrument's going to get so distorted that we can't even measure. We can't use it as an accurate measure. I think that's what's going to cause a reset. But like I said, if you're in the position to do this anyway, you know that like, crap, things are getting bad. If they get worse, we're going to need to do something about it. Well, you might as well just make it as worse as possible, knowing that you're going to hit the reset button regardless. Like, you might as well print as much money. You might as well do it doesn't matter. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be. And that's the thing. People think of this as the bad thing. I think America is going to come out like a band. I think we'll be fine. But anybody else that's dealing in U.S. assets outside of the United States may be absolutely done for. U.S. bonds may be junk, worthless. U.S. dollar may be worthless. And I think the dollar, and I think they may rebrand, they may create a new dollar, but call it the dollar. And I think we're actually on like the fourth or fifth iteration of the dollar. We had the dollar before we went on we had different types of dollars before we went on the federal standard. But then when we were on the Federal Reserve standard, we were partially under the gold reserve standard. Then we went from gold reserve to partial gold reserve. Then we went off the gold reserve. So we've like had multiple iterations of the dollar. We just keep calling it the dollar, even though the entire financial makeup is entirely different than what it used to be. And I think the same thing's going to happen here. Except the only difference is people holding bonds or people holding this iteration of the dollar outside the U.S. Like I said, I think inside the U.S. you may see something in terms of, I think inside the U.S. you may see a consolidation of the banks in order to prevent that. So people don't see a personal loss. People don't see a personal loss in wealth in themselves. But what ends up happening is like throughout the economy, you may end up seeing a bunch of banks that otherwise would have went under just get consolidated by the Fed because of it's. I think there's so many things at play here that can be just who knows. But at the end of the day, I do think the United States may come out fine, but at the expense of essentially everybody else because we're the world reserve currency.
Hey, I mean, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. That sounds like a U.S. move to do, but um, dude, it's so interesting because I think it was Raul Paul from Real Vision that made me shift my perspective kind of to what you were talking about a melt up scenario. Because what's happening is it's not that like real estate is blowing up and the stock market's blowing up and crypto's blowing up, and it's not necessarily that everything's blowing up. It's that inflation is propping up all these prices. All this nonsense is propping up all these prices. So it's not that everything is in a bubble per se, it's that the currencies are in a bubble and other assets are kind of fairly priced relative to what's going on. So it's interesting to like discuss it with you because it's powerful, man. It really is, and I know that you currently work and are a developer for XDC, and I do want to get into your specific forte just a little bit. My question to you is, what do you think XDC's role is going to play in this new system? Because in my head, this is kind of how I imagine things. Just I see XRP is kind of digital gold, Stellar is the silver, XDC is like copper, and ALGO is palladium. Is that something that I can kind of, does that kind of make sense, or am I missing it a little bit?
I'd say don't look at it in terms of that because I think that misses a lot of. I think that goes over a lot of important details of all the different technologies. I think the
Mhm.
way you want to look at it is look at industry leaders in terms of capability. So XRP may be a finance industry leader for liquidity's sake. XDC may be maybe a tech industry leader in terms of being able to share big data. You see what I mean? You may see something like you may end up seeing something like XLM being industry leader in terms of maybe not back end remittance like XRP, but peer-to-peer payments for
Yeah,
unbanked regions or whatever.
yeah.
I think what's going to end up happening is each network that's going to have some stake in the future is going to have some value proposition for essentially an industry of some sort. That's the simplest way to put it. A value proposition for an industry and essentially rise to the occasion of its industry. So you may have certain technologies that rise in the medical industry. You have certain
Mhm.
technologies that rise in finance, that rise in business, that rise in tech. And I think what's going to end up happening is it'll be more like that, where you'll more have like these industry networks that are typically used on these industries that will be typically used on certain networks based on whatever features they be.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say this is because I think XRP will absolutely slaughter in terms of the financial markets because of its capabilities.
Mhm.
But in terms of XDC, this is where things get really interesting because I think people don't really look at this, but I think XDC may take over not only trade finance, but it's almost like big data metadata around trade finance. So not only it's sort of like getting into automatic programmatic trading among different types of assets, but also the the commodification of the data around those assets in the first place. So it's one of those things where, like, if you're let's say you're a wealth management, let's say you're a wealth management advisor or something, and you're not only are you making trades in regards to being able to grow your portfolio, but you're also taking account of a lot of data and a lot of analytics. Well, I think
Mhm.
not only will XCC take over trade finance in terms of being able to track those trades, make those trades, and be able to make programmatic like financial decisions, but also being able to keep track of all that data around that too, and be able to build applications within that. So, and that's the thing. This is where the commodification of data becomes so important because what if not only are you keeping track of the financials and programmatically and creating a series of dApps to programmatically handle your portfolios, but you're also handling big data by being able to tokenize that data, share that data with whatever your peers may be, or being able to access other forms of data natively by being able to just simply pay for it. So let's say you're engaging with the market in some form of the world, and there's a smart contract elsewhere that's engaging with another market and a series of other assets. You can
Mhm.
essentially communicate with that other smart contract and retrieve data before you even have an engagement with it, just to see if you want to potentially make that next step. And I think you'll see a lot of that with smart contracts. But I think that's going to be the biggest thing with XDC, because we just had our partnership with TradeTech, and that's exactly what TradeTech's doing. TradeTech is they're not only tokenizing different financial assets that are already native in the already native in the financial space, like traditional assets, but it's also tokenizing the data around those assets. It's tokenizing the transactions. It's tokenizing the different relationships between the parties. And what that ends up doing is these tokens end up becoming commodities in themselves, because this is some information about something that somebody's willing to pay for in some capacity. And what ends up happening is these end up garnering a lot. Think of big data in general. Imagine a token associated with every piece of data associated with big data. So you end up having trillions, quadrillions of bytes of data constantly being shared and explored every day. And I think XCC is going to take that over in terms of trade finance metadata and tracking in terms of analytics. I think it's going to be huge.
Quincy, everything you just said to me just screams money. So what I'm gonna say, dude, is as far as the utility of the asset is concerned, it's there, it's coming. You're speculating that it's on its way, and you're literally building, making sure that this is gonna happen as well. So what I'll ask is,
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Well, let me actually, my bad, Quincy. Let me actually finish this real quick, and you can add on what you were gonna say as well. That what does that translate to as far as the price is concerned? How high do you think this baby could fly?
Yeah, so this is where things get really interesting. So one thing you really want to look at is, and what I was gonna say before was, sort of the dream everybody looks at it as Ethereum, as sort of like this like world computer. Well, Zinvin can do all of that, but at the same time, it can also maintain private data, because it's a hybrid blockchain that has public and private access to different data on it. So what ends up happening is not only are they able to tokenize this data, but they can have public-private access to be able to share it. And as of right now, we're really one of the only networks that are able to have this capability. So now you can essentially have entities that would otherwise operate on the internet like they normally would, without having to expose all of their data to everybody on these networks. And that's the thing, like everybody, like every token's got its shtick, and that's our shtick. The mere fact that they can essentially engage with all of the different features that you could on these EVM compatible blockchains while still being able to remain private essentially allows them to take their already established businesses and operate the same way they otherwise would on the blockchain. And that's the thing, all that data that wasn't otherwise able to be comprehended in terms of the value can all be tokenized and traded like it already is, but in a more native manner, which is going to allow for more engagements, more trades, more data. And we're really the only network that allows for that both public-private access point, because that's huge. That means you get to share what you want and not what you don't. And that's the thing. If you're able to do that, well, then I feel comfortable putting my data on that blockchain. How about you?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. Why not?